What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Formula America podcast with your hosts, Kurt and Dylan. And we're back on another race week. We've got the Down Under GP coming later on this week, the Australian GP. We've got a little bit of news to go over, a couple FIA issues that have popped up over the past couple days. What are we going to get into after that?
We got some speculations on some rookie reviews. What's going to happen with Lewis, Leclerc, and Lando's?
The three L's, as you called them.
The three L's.
So kind of what's next for those guys?
And
a little speculation.
You know, I want to talk about some Red Bull stuff. So, we're going to just shoot from the hip.
Cool. Well, that'll be exciting, and that'll give us a little bit of warm-up into the race week, and then we'll be back on Wednesday or Thursday with a little pre-race predictions, and we know how those go. So we'll see. I'm going to predict Logan Sargent is going to be
on the podium.
Oh, man. All right, so on that FIA, the rule updates, there was one that came out, I think, yesterday. And there's a rule called TD39. And I guess that's just like, what their
touchdown 39.
Exactly. That's it. And so TD39 is something that came about last year when they were having all the issues with porpoising, if you remember that. So they were saying that the cars were running such a low ride height that it was causing them to porpoise and causing damage to the cars, damage to the drivers. This one specifically came out shortly after that race where Lewis could barely get out of the car.
Yeah.
If you remember that one.
So sitting on the tire holding his back.
Yes. Yeah. And that just looked painful.
Yeah.
So basically what TD39 said is that the cars had to have a 15 millimeter ride height at minimum. And so over the weekend, FIA just like quietly just did away with that. So, I mean, it's 15 millimeters isn't much, but obviously it's enough where they made the rule in the first place last year. So I'd be interested to see kind of what that is going to bring about, what kind of change, So if the cars are not porpoising, it shouldn't matter, right? They should be able to go as low
15 millimeters is what, 3/4 of an inch?
Yeah, I don't know. It's not, I haven't done the conversion to American.
24 millimeters is an inch. So 15, we'll call it, 5/8. I mean, that's about how high your Mazda rode.
That Mazda was useless. So yeah, you're right. 0.59 of an inch is 15 millimeters. So just over half an inch.
I mean, that kind of makes sense. I get the whole point of putting the rule in place when the porpoising was as bad as it was. In the words of Christian Horner, if you have a problem, fix your fucking car.
Fix your fucking car.
And I guess now that like porpoising has been largely a non-issue, it kind of makes sense to get rid of the rule and let the cars and the constructors kind of continue to develop. So they I guess that makes sense. I mean, interesting. Yep. We'll see if anything comes of it. If someone, Mercedes all of a sudden starts porpoising down the straightaway, we'll know.
They start porpoising, but they're in first and second place, then I don't know. We'll see.
The Ferrari special.
The Ferrari special, yeah.
That's what happened last year. They were like, we don't care that it's porpoising. It's fast.
Oh, man. All right, so the other one that came out, and this is the one that I thought was interesting, was the FIA has changed the regulation about giving penalty points. So, and this was like after lobbying last year from some of the teams, namely Pierre Gasly and his camp.
Gasly.
Because he got a lot of his points from track limits, things like that, like minor infractions. So what they said now is they're going to reserve penalty points for dangerous driving, things like Lance Stroll, basically. So since they did that, unfortunately for Gasly, they didn't go back and make it retroactive. So he's kind of, he still has his points. So then Alpine was lobbying to get the points taken off, and the other teams on the grid were like, no. They were just like, no, you can't do that. So basically it was Alpine versus everybody else. And so far it seems like everybody else is winning, and Gasly's going to keep his points, meaning he's still only 2 points away from a race ban.
Yeah. And I'm sure the other teams are like, we're doing this for your own safety so that the Ocon Gasly explosion takes a little bit longer.
Yeah,
it's coming.
it's coming. It's like Almost like just please just get rid of him just so we could see it happen.
Drive to Survive is over there going, get rid of him, help us out here.
Yes.
I mean, that makes sense. It seems kind of, there's not many states here in the US that does points on the driver's license. I know Texas doesn't. I know some states do, but that seems to be largely a European thing for like normal driving. To get, like, if you get a speeding ticket, you get a point on your license and you're only allowed so many points and you get your license suspended. It's the same thing as the F1 guys, but it kind of seems dumb at the F1 level to give points for, a track limit or something. Like, I agree with that change to go to, if it's dangerous Lance Stroll moves, then you get a point. The whole point of F1 is to push the limits. Like, you're already
Wait,
getting
you're
penalized.
saying you guys don't get
There's
points on your license in Texas?
Nope. Do you in Florida?
What the hell? Hell yes. I remember when I was growing up, I was always right up against the max, and it was almost, I felt like Pierre Gasly every time I'm going out driving, like, oh, I got to keep it under control. And then as soon as I would get points, like I knew when points were dropping off, it was like, oh, there's no rules, baby.
Yeah,
I thought it was a normal US thing. Damn.
No, it was weird when I heard points were a thing. Someone had to explain it to me for normal driver's license. Here in Texas, you just get fined.
All right, well, another reason, I guess, to move to Texas maybe.
No, everyone stay away. We have too many people already. Everyone's already coming here. One other piece of news that you and I kind of texted about that I thought was interesting was McLaren. With the shakeup happening over there, they fired their technical director, and then they basically brought on a technical board with 2 new hires and a third that won't come on till January 24. But 2 new hires coming on now, one being head of aerodynamics and one being head of operations. And then I don't remember what the third guy is. But the interesting thing about that, so firing of technical director, bringing on technical board, and then that board answers directly to Andreas Stella, the president, and goes around Zach Brown. Now, Zach Brown is still there, but more is just a full CEO position, not I guess running the technical side. I don't know. Definitely like shows that McLaren's trying to make some changes.
Dude, and that's one thing, like you would see all these other teams that are being run by team principals, and then from the outside, it looks like Zach Brown was basically the team principal of McLaren. And I feel like this is probably a good move because Zach Brown's, he's got his hand in so many other things. He's running the road car brand. They've got, countless of other race series that they're in. And, in my opinion, McLaren is kind of a sinking ship under Zach Brown. So I'm glad to see that they're kind of going around that and doing a more traditional structure. So hopefully Andrea Stella can, do some principal stuff as the principal,
Yeah, like we kind of talked about. I don't know what it is about Zach Brown. And you said in Drive to Survive, he got overheard saying like, "Hey, don't trust him."
Yeah.
He kind of gives off that little bit of, I don't know, slimy's too strong of a word, but just
to me, he's like a used car dealer. And he's even got the belly for it. Like if you see the way his gut like pokes out, like, oh, what do I got to do to get you into this car? That's what I see from him. And he doesn't give me like reassuring vibes.
No. So it'll be interesting to have him just sit squarely in the CEO seat, have a technical board answering directly to the principal. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, hopefully we'll get some traction out of them. I really want to see them do well. I mean, obviously,
I do too.
I just got my Danny Rick shirt on, got my McLaren hat on. I want to see them do good.
I saw a thing on Instagram the other day that was showing all the generation of team ownerships.
Yep.
It went from Jaguar to Red Bull, or and it just had it all in chronological bars of what the progression is from Force India to Racing Point to Aston or whatever. And it was interesting. There was 4 solid ones: Ferrari, Williams, Haas, because Haas hasn't been around that long, but they weren't anyone, right? So Ferrari, Williams, and McLaren are the only 3 long-term teams that have not had a change in ownership.
Right.
And so it's kind of just one of the OGs. Like McLaren's been around since, you know, borderline the beginning. They've always just been McLaren. It's
Mm-hmm.
like, hey, it's kind of like when the Detroit Lions suck. I'm not a Detroit fan, but they're an OG NFL team. Like you want them
Yeah.
to be doing well. Like,
That's crazy to look at too when you think about the progression that like that. And all those teams, McLaren, Ferrari, and Williams, are kind of on the downturn. Ferrari was able to hold it together, I guess, kind of the longest. Yeah, kind of. Not maybe not as much.
I mean, they're the most
They've been on
winning
the
team in the
decline.
history. So
Yeah, but in recent history, they're all like
yeah,
kind of going down. Maybe that shows that you need to be able to constantly reinvent and evolve to be able to do well. But who knows?
I
Hopefully,
just thought
this
it was
new.
super interesting. But you want to
Yeah, it
see
is.
McLaren do well. I mean,
Yeah, for sure.
you watch old videos of the 70s and 80s and 90s racing, and they're in McLarens and Williams, and you don't know half the other names, but those names are still going
Yeah,
around the track.
yeah. That's why I'm happy to see Williams kind of on the come up again this year.
Yeah, with their Duracell battery on top. Cool. All right, that's all I got. Rookie update. Speaking of Williams,
All right, so the freshman class of 2023, including including Hulkenberg, he's coming back. Um, man, we've got only 2 races, but I mean, I think that we could see a little bit from some of these guys.
Yep.
All right, so let's just go down the list and we'll talk about them. Let's start with old Oscar Piastri. Speaking of McLaren, so this guy, his first race in Bahrain, he qualified P18, which brand new guy. You would hope that it would be a little bit higher, but we knew coming into it that McLaren wasn't going to be the best car. And then obviously we didn't get to see much out of him in the race because he had his steering wheel issue or
Microsoft
whatever.
update.
Yeah, his car updated 15 laps in. But man, Oscar in Saudi Arabia, that guy made it all the way to Q3 in that McLaren, which was an absolute dog. Which I don't think anybody expected it to get that high,
No.
especially not his. Maybe Lando's if Lando wouldn't have, hit the wall.
Yep.
But yeah, all the way up to Q3, and then the race starts, and he gets together with Gasly right at the beginning, and basically ruins his race and Lando's race. So I think it's still too early to tell on Oscar, but I am excited because of that one P9 in the qualifying in Saudi Arabia. So I think there's definitely a lot of potential with him. And if you remember back when we did our preseason predictions, I rated him as the highest rookie with the most promise. So I think that as long as we could see some more of that, I think Oscar's on his way to be pretty good and pretty big name in F1.
I think Oscar's shown a load of talent. I think he's definitely, for being a rookie, in the waves that he has made, he is showing talent. I saw a thing the other day, though, that I thought was really interesting and true, was that due to Oscar's entrance into F1 and the whole Alpine situation and moving to McLaren and all of the talk and the buzz that he has made and his history, I think he's got a target on his back to perform.
Yeah.
Much more so than Logan Sargent does. I don't think anyone is expecting much of anything from Logan Sargent this year.
Right.
But Oscar Piastri is absolutely expected to perform. And, that's got its pros and cons. If he does, he's got a hell of a career ahead of him. If he doesn't, he might get cut a little bit short and be a great talent that never was because he made a little bit too much noise out of the gate.
Yeah.
And I think that's a super true comparison between the two. So far, he's shown a lot of promise, but everyone's watching him and expecting him to as well.
Yep. He's definitely got the most pressure on him and the most to lose out of all of these rookies.
Yeah. But like you said, P9 in quali in an absolute just terrible car.
Mm-hmm.
So
hopefully, we'll see some more of that promise coming into Australia here. So on Sargent, let's move on to him. The American hero right here.
Florida
P19, man. The Florida man. That makes me so happy when I see that. So P19 in quali in Bahrain, didn't expect much. He is in a Williams after all. And then came in P12 though in the race.
Yeah.
So only 2 places out of the points, which is a win, I think, in anybody's book, especially, for somebody coming in first race in F1 in a Williams, and then he puts it 2 spots out of the points. Awesome. Can't
Ahead
ask
of
for
the
any more, in
McLarens,
my
ahead of the
opinion.
Haas's, ahead of the Alpha Tauris.
Yep. Who were all, except for the Alpha Tauris, the Haas's and the McLarens were thought that they would be higher up in the pack. And for him to beat all those, awesome. Good for him. Then we get to Saudi, and again in qualifying, he put in that lap time that would have had him basically seen the Q3, right? It
And no
was
one
good enough for that.
expected it because everyone was talking about how scary that track is. They were like, we have a new dude who's never driven in Saudi. He never drove F2 in Saudi. He's never been on the fastest street circuit in a brand new F1 car. And they're like, he's not going to do anything. It's a scary track. And then he set that lap time out of the gate. That was like, oh, okay.
Well, what they failed to take into account is that he is a Florida boy. He's a Florida man. He has no fear, right? He has no regard for his own personal safety. So I just came back from Fort Lauderdale, which is where he's from. If you saw how they drive down there, you would see why he did so well. Like, there are rules mean absolutely nothing down there.
More like guidelines.
So yeah, if that, very loose guidelines. All right. So he didn't get that lap or that lap time got taken away because he went a little off the track, on a straightaway. It happens. And then, so after that, he just couldn't put it together. So I don't even think he got a solid lap in.
No.
He was dead last in quali. And then he got up to P16 during the race, which, it's not the best. But again, he's in a Williams. He can always kind of say that, right? If he doesn't do well, be like, oh, it's a Williams. It's a Williams. And you're like, okay, fine.
Yep.
So but I will say that his race result in Bahrain and his quali result, if it wasn't for that exceeding track limits, show some promise in old Logan Sargent there.
Yeah, it absolutely does. And a lot of people have said he doesn't deserve the seat that he's in, that other people deserved it more. And so I do think he does have a bit of a target on his back. And so definitely not as much as Oscars, but he's in a Williams, but he needs to be beaten Albon. And so,
the one thing that I did not like, and that you can kind of see maybe a flaw, is that once he got flustered, he could not hook it up again after that.
Yep.
And it just kind of like he needs to learn to shake it off. And so if he can do that, then I think he'll be fine. But it seems like right now he's like, doesn't have that resilience to kind of just, let it run off his back and get out and do it again. So we'll see going forwards how he's able to handle the pressure.
Yep. And Nick DeVries, who no one's even heard of for the first 2 races.
I had to look it up because before this, I was like, what did he do? I have no idea.
No one knows.
And so, Nick DeVries, the guy that came in and was kind of like, I guess, reported as saying that he didn't want to be known as a rookie or, considered to be a rookie.
Formula E world champ.
Yep. Formula E world champ, 27, I think, years old. He's been around for a bit, but he's performing like a rookie right now. He's not really doing much. Bahrain, he qualified 16th and he finished the race in 14th. He made up 2 spots, nothing really noteworthy during that race. And then the next race, he qualified in P18 and then made up 4 spots and, finished the race in P14. But if you look at him compared to Tsunoda, who we all thought coming into this season, or at least you and I said, Nick DeVries is going to get there and he's going to outshine Tsunoda and, he's clear number 1 on the team. That's not the case. I don't know if Yuki has just stepped it up this year or if Nick is just underperforming that bad, but Tsunoda's outperforming Yuki, by far.
Tsunoda got points.
In
Bahrain.
I thought he's P11 in Bahrain.
Did he get? You're right. K-Mag blipped him on the last 5 laps, but he was 11 then.
Yep. So he actually finished P11 both races, and he's out qualified DeVries in both races as well. So, Yuki, I think, is claiming his spot as the number 1 on that team so far.
He is. It'll be interesting to see. I mean, you got to also realize the rookies are still learning their cars. Never been in Formula 1 cars before. I mean, DeVries had 1 race last year in a Williams. but rookies are still, everyone always says it takes a full year to figure a car out. So, you can make that excuse for him. But he didn't want to be known as a rookie. He already has a race. You're a Formula E world champion. And Yuki Tsunoda is doing well, but he's not a world champion. If Nick DeVries
No.
wants to be, he needs to start stepping it up for sure.
Yep. That's why I think this will be good to do like quarterly throughout the season and just
Yeah.
kind of see like, oh, well, this time, DeVries is outperforming Yuki. So, and just kind of track that progress to see who's actually able to get a hold of that car and
Yeah.
then, continue to progress. All right. And the last guy, Hulkenberg, coming into this season after testing and all that, the Haas was looking pretty good. And I think there was a lot of hype around it. And then Bahrain, Hulk puts it in P10 on quali. But then once the race starts, it's like those Haas's just can't keep up and
No
just
race
find
pace.
themselves back. He got 15th in the race, and then in Saudi Arabia, he qualified 11th and then dropped down to 12th, for the result. And looking him against K-Mag, K-Mag's outperforming him. But again, as we said on the last one, K-Mag's been in that car for at least 2 seasons, and then
Yep.
besides taking time off and all that time he was in the car before that, so he does have a ton more experience in that car and with the team. So we'll see. I think Hulkenberg will probably make that switch and start outperforming K-Mag at some point.
I don't see it. I think
You don't
K-Mag's
see
gonna
it?
hold it. Yeah, I think K-Mag's gonna hold it.
It would be interesting. I just feel like Hulkenberg coming back into the season has a lot to prove, and I just K-Mag, I like K-Mag. He just seems so inconsistent. Like he'll have some races like you saw last year. You got pole in Suzuka. Granted, it was,
Mhm.
in the rain and all that, but still, that's pretty
Got
impressive.
pole.
He got pole, and that's all that matters. And so, but other than that, it's like sometimes just like he's not there or he's dive bombing somebody, just kamikazing in a corner.
I totally agree with you, but the reason I think K-Mag is gonna hold that spot is if you are a consistent driver like Hulkenberg in that Haas, you're gonna consistently not be in the points. If you want
Yeah.
to score points, you're gonna have to dive bomb and do some crazy shit every once in a while to get
You
up
gotta
there, to get that pole position, to get to 10th place, to get points on the board. And that's why I think Hulkenberg is going to consistently not score points and be just outside of them. K Mag might not finish half of his races, but on the ones he does finish, he's dive bombing it down the inside as always. And he's going to get some points on the board. I think
that's true.
if we had both of them sitting in the Ferraris or the Mercedes or whatever, I'd have a totally different opinion. And I think Hulk would be, you know, outperforming K Mag. But I think in that Haas, where the ground level expectation is to not score points, I think K Mag's going to come out on top on the points.
You got to risk it for the biscuit, I guess.
That's exactly right. So that's the rookies. But while we're talking on the races and whatnot and dive bombing it down the inside and comparing teammates, I want to talk about Red Bull real quick.
Yes.
Last podcast, you said that you would love to go back and watch the last 10 laps and listen to the Red Bull radios. And so one night, glass of whiskey in hand, I did that. And it was super interesting.
So the premise for this was because we
Yeah.
were talking about whether or not Max knew that Checo had fastest lap and then took it from him on purpose, or if he just took it and didn't realize it was Checo's.
Yep.
Okay.
And the Red Bulls pulling away, it seemed like they had the actual absolute hammer down. Like it was just an interesting what was going on inside those cars. And so I watched Max's point of view first. And honestly, there was very little talking at all. You heard on the race, you heard the radio transmission of Max asking who had the fastest lap. And his engineer came back and said, "Hey, we're not worried about that right now." And Max came back and said, "Well, I am." That was the whole transmission. There wasn't anything after that except for like 10 seconds later, the engineer came on and said, "Hey, the fastest lap is 131.9."
Mm-hmm.
That was it. Didn't say who it was, just said fastest lap 131.9. And then Max didn't say anything. And he kept going. And there was almost like no talk for the rest of the time. There's a couple of times where the engineer came on and was like, "Hey, we're targeting a 33.0. Hey, we're targeting a 33.0." Make sure you're targeting a 33.0. Max never responded to any of them, and then finished the race. And that was it. Like, that was the whole. So I was like, man, Max didn't tell him he was going for fastest lap, like, or anything. So then I switched over to Checo's radio, which was way more interesting and more telling. So, like, started 10 laps out, lap 40 going in. Checo was asking for constant updates of what Max's lap times were. Okay, constantly. He even asked who had the fastest lap around like lap 45, and they were like, "You do at the moment at a 1:31.9." And he was like, "Oh, cool." But when he was asking for Max's updates, because we all heard on the Perez transmission that his engineer came over and said, "Hey, we're targeting a 32.6 plus 0.4. So we're targeting a 33.0." And Checo fired back and was like, "Well, what is Max's time right now? Is it 32.6? Why are you telling me to do 33s if Max's is faster?" And he got all flustered. But when you listen to all of the transmissions, they were reading to him Max's lap times, and Max was hitting 133 zeros, like, consistently, like 132.9, 133.0, 133.1. Like, it was consistently at the pace that Red Bull was telling him to set. And then it wasn't until the last lap, Max took it. But there was no transmission to Checo about Max, taking it or anything. If anything, it was like, hey, everyone's playing very fair right now. I thought it was very interesting. So, in summary, the implications that I see and what I think is so interesting about this is, one, those Red Bulls absolutely pulled away from the track, not chasing each other. Like, they were setting the lap times that Red Bull engineers said were the ones they needed to be setting. That was a safe, good race pace for them. Don't push the car. So we have definitely not seen the full potential, and those cars were lapping a second a lap faster.
Jesus.
There was also a ton of speculation that Max couldn't catch Checo and that he was not closing the gap. Well, then when you listen to all this, Max wasn't trying to close the gap. There was no team orders that were going to be issued for Max to take it. Like, Max was playing good boy and knew he was going to have a second place finish here. He wasn't trying to chase down Checo. I do think Max probably assumed Checo had the fastest lap, but he did not know. So the cool down room where there was that little bit of fighting back and forth, Max was being kind of honest when he was like, "Oh, I didn't realize you had the fastest lap." I think he probably knew it, but no one told him that it was Checo's.
Yeah. That's wild. And you know what else I bet he probably knew was that by him getting the fastest lap, he would stay in the lead for the championship.
I'm sure. You're doing the math in your head. You know.
That's so crazy to me that they can say hit this time, and within a tenth of a second, you're doing that around a track, 27 or however many
4 miles
turns
long.
Yeah, and you're able to do that. That is wild to me.
Yeah.
That's impressive.
Super impressive.
But that's also, like you said, that's scary to think what they can do if they are actually being challenged, because they could clearly drop the hammer and just pull away.
Yeah, because that's what Max did on the last lap. Instead of doing his 33.0, he just ran it up to a 31.5 or something. Like, just went ahead and go take that fastest lap time. Oh, it's only a 1:31.9. Like,
on old tires.
On old tires, yes. So I thought that was really interesting. That the Red Bulls are fast, and there was not drama between them.
Yeah,
they definitely churched it up. The commentators were talking about it. The cool down room definitely seemed like there was drama, but if you listen to those radio transmissions, Max wasn't chasing down Checo. Max knew he was in second place. Max didn't technically know that Checo had the fastest lap. Like, it seemed like everyone was playing team.
So you're saying maybe Max isn't the villain that everybody's making him out to be? Maybe.
I go back to, I think I sent it to you, the interview on Instagram where Danny was talking about Max.
Mm-hmm.
And Danny said Max is who he is. There's no sugarcoating it. There's no, like, who you get with Max all the time. And he's just kind of, a total alpha race car driver that doesn't have a great sense of humor. But it was interesting listening to Danny dote on Max. And seems like they really kind of enjoyed each other. But I think that Max gets made out to be the villain because he doesn't have the personality for TV to be made the hero. Like,
yeah. Yeah, he seems like very upfront. What you see is what you get. Not going to sugarcoat things.
Yeah. So I don't know. I thought that was really interesting. Moving on. Are we going to 3Ls? Are we doing the 3Ls?
Yes, the 3 L's. So this is going to be a little bit of speculation here. So
A lot of bit
this
of
is
speculation.
a lot of speculation, right? And you could even say that maybe I'm putting on my tinfoil hat of conspiracies here. But what started this is last week, I think it was. I saw a post on Instagram. You may have seen it, where Lewis Hamilton and Lando Norris were playing golf together. And
I did not
so
see this.
well, they went out and they played golf together, and somebody else was there, like Uncle Larry or something. I don't know,
Was
but
Lewis wearing like full on high fashion clothes
no, he
with
was actually wearing regular, normal, like
huh,
subdued golf clothes. So
interesting.
I don't know what he
You
showed
sure
up to the place in.
sure it wasn't a doppelganger?
Yeah, right. But so this got my mind racing. I was like, these guys are playing golf together, and then this was during my car trip. So I was driving. We had an 8-hour car ride, so I had a lot of time to think about this. So it might get kind of wacky. But in my mind, this is how the scenario played out. Lewis invites Lando to go play golf because he knows that Lando likes to golf. He gets there and they're talking about the future and what's coming up. And Lando's contract is over in 26, I believe.
25.
25? Yeah, 25, right? And so in my mind, what happened is Lewis is like, hey, man, I realized that I said before I wanted to stick around for my 8th championship. This might not happen. I'm going to give it until 2025. I know your contract is up in 2025. And at that time, I want you to take my seat. And I think that within the team, Lewis has already kind of slotted Lando to be his replacement. And so I think he's like, I know things are tough there, but just hang on until 2025 and you will get my seat if you can do that. So I think that's what's going to happen. But that's going to cause a huge ripple across the grid at that point as well. But from that small scenario and that one picture, that's where my mind went on an 8-hour car ride. What do you think
That's
about that?
super interesting. I don't see Lewis going anywhere. There's tons of speculation about him going to Ferrari or whatever. Lewis isn't going anywhere. And everyone's making these speculations because he kind of had an outburst one time about Mercedes not listening to him.
Mm-hmm.
One, I see a 0% chance of him going to Ferrari. The Ferrari culture would
Right.
not support Lewis.
Nope.
And so he's absolutely not going there. And if you take Ferrari out of the picture, there's nowhere else to go. He's not going to Aston. He's not going to Red Bull. Christian Horner can't stand him.
Right.
So I don't think Lewis is going anywhere. I think the question is when does he retire? Kind of leading into your point of view there. I think it would be so one going chronologically and thinking this through out loud. Mercedes is not going to be third fastest for long. They will move closer to Red Bull. Will it be enough to take the championship? I don't know. We look at the 2021 season, though, the Mercedes was clearly a faster car than the Red Bull, and Max still won. Arguably not for the right reasons, but they went into the last race dead tight on points. We could have a reversal of that next year, right? Where Mercedes might not be as fast as that Red Bull, but they're close enough and strategic and clever enough to, continue to score points and be up there competing. Lewis, everyone keeps talking about how old Lewis is and he's fading. I still see every bit of fight in Lewis that was there 5, 6, 7 years ago. He's not as outspoken and rash and aggressive about it. It's much more of a mature racer style, but that dude is not riding off into the sunset or taking a break or whatever. Like he absolutely wants to win. And you kind of get a twofer, right? Like generally at this stage, you look at Kimi Räikkönen, you look at Sebastian Vettel, even Alonso up to a certain point. He got lucky with the switch to Aston. You get this old with this passive a career, you generally go back to a team to help him to develop. He's getting to kind of do that at Mercedes where he's been the whole time. This is the development phase. And I see that car coming back to the front quickly. Interesting point on Lando, though. Maybe so. If I'm Lando, I would totally listen to that conversation and be like, yeah, I'm totally interested and see what McLaren does. Obviously, Lando has some kind of belief that McLaren's still going to be there. Otherwise, he'd be making moves. So I don't know. I don't see Lewis going anywhere. The saying that always comes to mind with Mercedes and Lewis is what was it in Spider-Man? Was I think was the movie was that you either die the hero or live long enough to see yourself become the villain. And
Yep.
that was Mercedes and Lewis through and through, right?
Mm-hmm.
He became the hero and then kept winning and became the villain. And now he became the villain and is coming back around to being a hero. Everyone's
Yeah.
loving the Lewis story and the Mercedes story right now, and their drive to succeed is like a palpable
Yeah.
like motivation. Like if I'm Lewis Hamilton, why would I leave when if we all feel that? Can you imagine what their factory is feeling? Like
Yeah.
they're making moves. Um and then 26 is huge change up to the regulations. If I'm, knowing Mercedes's development capabilities and there's a big change up coming and they're going to learn from their mistakes, I don't know if I'm riding off in the sunset at a development change. I might try and stick around for the 2026 and see what happens.
Ooh.
So I don't know, man. I don't see Lewis going anywhere. I don't see Lando going anywhere. And I don't see Leclerc moving either. I think that we're kind of stuck with what we got right now. And that makes it almost more entertaining.
Yeah, no, and that was the thing too. That was kind of what started this whole thing. Is I was thinking a lot of like, what's next for Lewis, Lando, and Leclerc, because obviously, well, in my opinion, I feel that they're all not being served well by their teams, their current
Mhm.
teams. So that was actually, what led into when I saw that picture and led into that train of thought. But then, so I went out and I was reaching out for some, some community engagement to see where everybody else's head was at. So I posted a thing on one of the Facebook forums. So let me go over some of the responses and kind of get your opinion on some of these. And so basically, it was like the question I was asking was, what's next for Lewis Leclerc and Lando? Should they wait it out and see if their respective teams can figure out their issues, or should they begin to look elsewhere? And if elsewhere, then where? And like we said, there's doesn't seem to be many options for them, but I want to get your take on some of these here. One of the ones that I got, and this is one that actually I saw a couple people had mentioned something similar, and this is on Lewis specifically. And so he said Lewis should be more concerned about beating George this year than winning an eighth championship. If he loses to George again, it will begin to raise a lot of questions. Now,
Yeah, I totally agree on that. I was thinking about this, listening to another podcast, and you and I had this conversation specifically about Danny Rick. If you're Red Bull and Checo doesn't work out, do you pull up a Nick DeVries? Do you go with Danny Rick, or like what do you do? And after kind of talking it through, we both agreed that as a business, you go with the younger guy.
mm-hmm,
I feel the same way about Mercedes. Mercedes is never going to just kick Lewis to the curb. There's too much history there. Toto's his best friend. But if I am Mercedes, I'm probably putting some eggs in that George Russell basket. I completely agree that Lewis needs to be, and I have no doubt that he is aware of how good George Russell is and the career he's got in front of him, and he's only going to
mm-hmm,
get better. Um, I absolutely agree with that statement. I also thought it was interesting, because we always say that Mercedes and Lewis are kind of synonymous or synonymous. Yeah, that's the word.
yeah,
But Lewis wanted Botas to stay.
yeah,
He was 100% on do not get rid of Botas. I like Botas. Botas is great. And Mercedes said, that's great. We're pulling Georgia. So, I mean, Mercedes definitely doesn't cater or pander to Lewis. Maybe not like it seems on the outside. So, yeah, I agree with him. I think he does need to focus on being the best in the car he has.
So to caveat on that, how many seasons does he have to start playing second fiddle to George before he decides that's enough? You know, if George is outperforming him 2-3 seasons, is he going to stick around for that next regulation change, or does he not want to? Do you get to the point where you want to save your reputation, not tarnish your reputation anymore? Damage control almost.
God, I don't know. Because I think at the end of the day, as the level of competitor and racer that all of those guys are, I
Mm-hmm.
think I'd be more worried about leaving the sport for good on that note. I think I'd keep striving to do better and outperform and end on a high note.
And yeah, but then
Um,
you get to the point of like a Vettel or a Raikkonen who, eventually is like hasn't been on the podium in years at that point, and that's basically all you think about. Like, yeah, you're like, oh, it's a two-time world champion or a four-time world champion or whatever. Um, but you're only really as good as your last race or your last season.
Yeah. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see it play out. I think George has more potential where we currently sit than Lewis, but I do not think he is a better racer than Lewis yet.
Right. Not yet. Not yet. I think that he could potentially get there, but not now.
Yep.
All right, so we'll go over maybe two more. So this other one says for Lewis, waiting and hoping that Mercedes will give him a competitive car is the best. I don't think any other leading teams would want him at the end of his career, and for now he should focus on beating his teammate. For Lando, he has to change his mind setting and be more aggressive. He's too passive. And on Leclerc, he has a bright future. He showed his potential and is not excelling because of car problems. He's the opposite of Norris with a strong will to succeed, and any other team on the grid would be more than happy to have him. Speaking on Leclerc. So basically saying same thing we just said about Lewis, same thing as the other guy, saying that
Yep.
Lando is passive, needs to be more aggressive, and that Leclerc has a bright future, and the only reason he's not winning is because of his car.
Yeah.
So
I mean, but that's the
I
whole
agree
issue we've
with
talked
two of
about with
those.
Leclerc the whole time. You're right. He's not winning because you can't even really say because of the car, because of the team, because of the
Yes.
strategy, because of the optics, because of the reliability. Um, like, which is the whole argument for should Leclerc stay with Ferrari? Does he think that those issues are solvable issues? And if he doesn't, it's time to look elsewhere. If he does, you're going to stay with the team. And that's been our argument with Leclerc the whole time. You're right. He's got a super bright future. Him and Lando both do. Are they on the right team to achieve those futures? I think that's the overarching question. Like, so I agree with that guy. Leclerc isn't doing well because of his team. So should Leclerc move? Probably not, but like he just kind of reiterated the question.
Yeah. Yeah, I think honestly on that, going back and actually really thinking about these, it's always fun to speculate like, "Oh, what if this happened? What if that happened?"
Yeah.
But if you're in their shoes, you might get frustrated, but realistically, if you're Leclerc, where else are you going to go, right? You're
Yeah.
not going to go anywhere else cuz Ferrari has a fast car. You're just going to hope that they can get their head out of their ass like we talked about before. He needs to step up and probably take a more leadership role and start,
Hmm.
making things move himself within the team. And once they do that, he'll be fine. And then, with Norris, I still think that Norris should probably wait for another seat in, Mercedes to open up potentially.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, honestly, I think right now or in the near future, they all just need to hold what they got and, not be too quick to make a career-ending decision, go
Yep.
down that path of Fernando Alonso or Danny Ricciardo. I think especially with Norris, having Ricardo as a friend, I think that's probably something that Danny's probably telling him is like, hey, wait it out. Don't just jump
Yep.
ship. Don't be too quick to jump ship. Wait for something that's actually a better seat to open up. Because yeah, that would be the worst thing you do is start making moves. And everybody looks at Fernando now, but how long? He's 41 years old. He got lucky on this last move. He did a
And he
lot
hasn't
of
been
a lot of
relevant
moves.
since 2012.
Exactly, right? So you definitely don't be too quick to be the next Fernando Alonso.
Yeah. Everyone's loving Fernando right now, but they forget the past 10 years of who's Fernando.
Yeah, right. This guy's coming back. What's he doing?
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yep.
think that's good on that. I think that we've come to a conclusion, and in our professional opinion, I'll reach out to them and I'll let them know what we came up with, and that way they'll stay where they're at.
Yeah. You'll call Fred and Zach.
Yeah,
You're on first name basis with
eh,
those guys, I'm sure.
yeah. Look, guys, you got nothing to worry about. Dylan and I spoke, and we came up with the plan.
The other thing I did think about with Lando, and it was a smart move by Zach Brown and McLaren, was the contract for 3 years and $80 million. Sure, that's a nice penny to Lando, but that is a huge chunk of cash if someone wants to buy him out.
Yeah,
So on the
that's
flip
true.
side, like sure, you're incentivizing Lando to stay, but you're de-incentivizing everybody else trying to buy him.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Yep,
So it's a crazy world out there.
it is. Yeah, it sucks. You know, these are first world problems. You're making millions upon millions of dollars, and it's like, what do I do next?
Yeah.
You know what?
It
Just fix your fucking car.
just fix your fucking car, man. I don't know. I'd be careful saying that to Toto Wolff because I think they're going to fix that car. I mean, so so I was thinking about this the other day, kind of going astray a little bit here, but we always got time. Um, Aston Martin is got a Mercedes rear end, right? They've got the Merc entire drivetrain from power unit to transmission to rear suspension setup. All Aston Martin did was develop a better aero package that was similar to Red Bull's, right?
Hmm.
And they jumped from P7 to P2, right? Overnight. You take now Mercedes, and I don't think there's a team out there that can outdevelop Mercedes. And they've
Right.
proven that for years. Or maybe, if someone can, Mercedes is always in the conversation. And now Mercedes is going back to the drawing board to redevelop. And you cannot tell me that they're not going to come out with a package that's going to look oddly similar to another car, and they are going to come out fast. They
Yes.
don't have a Lance Stroll to hamstring them also. They've
That's
got
true.
two of the best racers on the track and one of the best strategists leading them with the best development team. So I
Yeah.
thought that was just thinking about like Aston Martin having the heart of Mercedes. And now let's talk about who's going to outdevelop an aero package. And I'm going to put my money and Aston's done well with Lawrence Stroll. Like they're going to develop a hell of a package. They've got Adrian Newey's protege over there. Like they're going to do good. I don't know. So the question becomes who's going to be a better developer, Mercedes or Aston Martin? And I
Hmm.
mean, on the surface, I'd put my money on Mercedes.
Yep.
Like
Every day.
every day. It's going to be fun when they come out with their Red Bull package to see how fast they become.
Yeah, that's actually an interesting thought, and completely true. You're right, because that Aston Martin is just a Mercedes dressed up as a Red Bull.
Yep. And Mercedes is about to dress up as a Red Bull as well. So let's see who does it better.
Oh man. Well, hopefully that'll happen soon, but we'll see. So what's next? We've got today's Monday. We've got oh man, I just realized the Australian GP is in Australia, which means it's like 1 a.m. here in Florida. It's probably what, midnight for you, I think. 12 a.m. in
Qualifying is
Texas.
12 a.m. to 1 a.m. Yeah, that's going to be, well, I guess I'll
Ooh,
be watching it recorded when I wake up in the morning.
yes, I'll be watching it in the morning.
Yeah. Well, that kind of sucks. Well, it kind of.
Yep.
I don't mind waking up before everyone else and turning it on. So,
Yeah. And because then there's no
um,
pressure either to like get up at a certain time. So
yeah.
yeah, I'll do
But
the same. Wake up and watch it.
so Wednesday, Thursday, you're gonna get probably Thursday from us. We might record it Wednesday and then send it out there Thursday. We'll do our pre-race weekend where we'll give you a little bit of history and updates on the track, the drivers, the news, and what our just expert, perfectly accurate predictions for the weekend
So,
are.
so I have a prediction for the predictions. I think the predictions this time are going to be spot on. That's my prediction.
My prediction is that our predictions are going to do better than last time, where we both scored 0 points. So
Last time we were basically McLaren. So we have to do better.
you can only go up. All right.
Oh man.
So yeah, that's we'll get that out to you guys, and then we'll go into the race weekend.
Hell yeah. Well, guys, if you like what you heard, make sure you give us a review and a rating on whatever podcast platform you're listening to. Those definitely help us out a lot. And if it's on YouTube, make sure you like and subscribe. And I think that's it.
I think so.
Okay. Well,
And
then,
with that, stay classy, America.
see you next time.